Welcome back to Unsolicited, where we cover all things about the realities of government contracting, how industry works behind the scenes, and what actually shapes effective partnerships across federal programs. Be sure that you subscribe so that you actually catch every single episode. Today, our guest is Tom Prokop, growth architect and systems builder who helps founders scale in unforgiving markets without burning themselves or their companies to the ground. He is the founder of government contracting firm that he scaled from 0 to over 10 million in revenue, earning ISO certifications, the Inc. 5000 award 2 years in a row, and prime contracts across federal defense, civilian agencies, state and local government, higher education, and commercial markets. Today, Tom is the managing director of Kraken Federal, where he works with GovCon founders and leadership teams to install operating systems for growth. He works focused on turning chaos into control through disciplined capture strategy, business development architecture, ISO implementation, and C-suite transformation. He also leads Rodin Holdings, where he applies the same systems discipline outside GovCon, partnering with operators in construction, logistics, and energy to build AI-native infrastructure and applied intelligence that creates real leverage, not just hype. He's worked with organizations like KPMG, the Home Depot, and Omnicare, now CBS Health, but his edge comes from being both an operator and an advisor. Tom, welcome to Unsolicited.
Thank you, Hope. Honored to be here.
We're really glad to have you on. When you and I spoke, I was really interested in the myriad things that you have had the privilege of doing. And man, is the scope pretty broad.
Yes, it was. It's been a very interesting career. Always looked as each opportunity as a stepping stone, and so made a number of changes until I decided to launch my own company.
I like it. And I like that your company is one of those companies that's helping other companies, right? I think that, in the GovCon space, everybody sees things as competition, when in reality, it's not always competition. Sometimes there are companies that are really just trying to help other companies do well in the space.
Right, and that was the whole premise with Kraken, was that when I had launched my prior company, Dinocrates, there was really nobody there to mentor or to help or kind of help guide you along the right path, right? And so I wanted to take this as an opportunity to do such. Kraken first started off with doing a turnaround of a $30 million IT services firm. And then that rolled into word of mouth and helping out other companies. And that's how we evolved into this kind of, founder growth model of working with founders and within that C-suite to really grow them and be there for them and help them with making those right decisions. Because, it's a wide playbook that's out there.
That's great. And I'm excited. I want to know more about this because we asked you kind of, what do you want to talk about? And one of the things we heard was turning things from this heroic sort of chaos to repeatable wins. So let's dig into that a little bit, because you said most companies aren't failing because of bad people. They're failing because everything depends on heroics. When you walk into a GovCon company like that, what are some of the first signs you're seeing?
Yeah, well, so when you're talking about heroic chaos, you're looking at something it's constant urgency, right? So everything is last minute. Think of that constant fire drill, and it's always the same people that are trying to save the day, right? And looking back at my prior experiences with large Fortune 500 companies, we're very process and system driven. I mean, in order to become a multi-billion-dollar company, right, you have to have those types of things in place in order to scale, right? Then moving into GovCon and seeing this at the startup stage, it's like, at what point do you really start to put those pieces in, right? So when you're looking at this from an inside of the company, right, you're seeing where it's, pricing is done last minute, delivery teams are panicking after they win the award, right? And you have those same people that are trying to save the day. And it's really the fact that they don't have any systems in place, right? They haven't standardized their operations. They have always just focused on trying to get the next win versus how do we actually scale this?
Right. So it's more like all of everything is emergent instead of the preparation. And if you had done the preparation ahead of time, there'd be less of that emergent sort of feeling when things happen.
Right, right, right. And we know a lot of these companies, right? Because they look busy and successful from the outside and they're winning work, but internally they just have this constant stress and it basically really stresses out the organization. And basically that if a company needs heroics to win, they're gonna need heroics to deliver. And heroics, at least as far as I know, is not something that I can actually scale and make repeatable, right? And that's the whole rinse wash repeat mentality of being able to grow and scale a company, is to have systems and processes in place.
Yeah, because it can be really exhausting for the people that are having to like run around and try to put out fires and solve problems because there was no process in place.
Right, right. You see a lot of burnout, and you can kind of, a little inside the beltway thing is watch LinkedIn and see where people are moving from and see where that constant rotation is, because there are a number of firms within the beltway where you will see a churn of proposal writers and BD people and capture folks, because it's a lot of the spray and pray, and that then has this cascading effect.
And this is what happens when you dig in deeper. You find those patterns, right? Of those things that are consistently showing up. And are you finding that the leadership often thinks the problem is something else other than them having proper processes in place?
Yes, yes. I mean, really, it comes down to three problems, right? First off is decision timing, right? So they're not thinking early enough, right? And having that strategic plan of like, hey, who buys, what do I sell? How do they buy it? Where do they buy it? And kind of having an actual strategic plan in terms of their pursuits. So it's a lot of that late, you're more reactionary in terms of what you're pursuing, and you're throwing out a lot of bluebirds, right? Second is ownership. Like what I've seen is a lot, no really no one truly owns the entire BD cycle, right? So you have fragment, you have the BD folks here, you have pricing folks here, you have, yeah, and sometimes, depending on how pricing is set up and the size of an organization, it may be a whole separate accounting issue, right? So there was one company I was working with in particular that was in going into that mid-size, and we ended up uncovering a pricing issue with them, and it was nobody was including the accounting team with it. So they had it was something that moved to the accounting team, but then because of the lack of communication, they had a number of issues where it's like, hey, we need to really track down and figure this out, and that was a key issue to that.
Yeah, they're caught on
um
their back foot.
yeah, yeah, and then lastly, it's alignment, right? Like folks need to feel like they're on the same team, right? Instead of operating like separate departments, right? So I actually had a chief growth officer that worked for me that was Army artillery, right? And kind of like setting that shell downrange, right, and starting to zero in with that. And he had created this whole business acquisition plan, which really looked like a war plan, right? Of like, and basically his thing behind this was that every single box that was in there, each one that you do increases your P-win. Each one that you don't do decreases your P-win, right? And it was a
Hmm.
complete battle plan and this is early 12, 18 months out of an opportunity, so that you're doing all the right things leading up to it and then all the way through it. So it was a full end-to-end battle plan, as we would call it.
Wow. So as you're talking about this, it's stemming a thought in me about something I recently saw in the Brony Center's new government contracting trends index. And it's striking because firms operating the way that you describe are running on adrenaline. I mean, that's what you said. There's last minute proposals, it's
Mhm.
constant scrambling. And so we're the same ones that are showing those. These are, sorry, the ones that are showing that constant weakest financial performance. And so when I read the report, it kind of took me aback because the companies that are operating exactly how you're describing are struggling the most financially. Do you find that there's a correlation? I mean, hearing you lay this out, it feels like those dots have to connect, right? Are those the ones that you see struggling the most?
So I would say that financials are more of a scoreboard, right, than the
Okay.
costs, right? So
Oh.
it's the lack of the systems and the foundation underneath, and it's just at the point that it rolls up to the financials that you're actually seeing it, right? So when I work with a lot of our clients, I bring a lot of dashboarding into play so that we're able to monitor, because once again, if you can't measure, you can't improve,
Mm.
right? And so kind of like going back to that report, I think that the financials are really that canary in a coal mine to say, yes, of course you're going to be doing bad because you don't have these other things lined up, right? And that's something I've seen just over the course of now kind of coming in on this other side now and working with GovCons, is that it's not, you're a doctor, right? It's, hey, I may have I think something's wrong with my hip, right, or my back, but it's actually a misalignment with maybe my knee or my ankle, right? And it's just setting off other pain points, right? And so,
Hmm.
kind of similarly to that, right? You're looking at, hey, the financials. Okay, hey, I'm losing money, but why am I losing money, right? And it's, you got to look upstream from that and say, hey, was it something with sales and marketing? Is it something with, how we're doing, our actual delivery? Did we not staff it correctly, right? And not having those pieces in place, then end up impacting the financials.
No, I think it's good that you mentioned that a lot of the times what we see are the symptoms, not necessarily are we digging back in and finding what's actually causing the problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah, no, it's important. So let's talk about how sometimes the environment can shape the ceiling that company is capable of, right? So sometimes that internal environment, maybe the leadership alignment, peer networks, advisors, that kind of thing, will um, not necessarily set that company up for success, because you've said that founders often think they have skills problem when their real issue is the environment in
Hmm.
which they work. So in GovCon specifically, when you say someone has an environment problem, what does that actually look like in the day to day?
Right. So first off, I'm not talking about networking events. That's
Yeah.
probably that's probably where everybody's like, oh, okay, here's the GovCon events piece. Yeah, we should get out more. And yes, you should get out, but that's not what I'm talking about in terms of environment. I'm really talking about like who influences your decision when things go wrong, right? So in GovCon, environment problem usually looks like leaders surrounded by people who normalize chaos, right? And we've
Mm.
seen that, and they go from company to company, and they have the teams, and it's just a continued chaotic manner, right? Last minute bids, reactive pricing, constant firefighting, and they treat it as like, well, it's GovCon, right? And that's just
This
how
is
it
how we
is,
do
right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I mean, that's coming from my perspective of commercial prior in multi-billion-dollar companies. It's like that's not how the world really works, right? Like it shouldn't be like this. Like there's a
Yeah.
better
Do you
way,
really think
right?
that all companies that made it as far as they made it did it with this kind of chaos? The
Yeah,
answer is
no,
no, right?
no.
Like
Yeah,
they
and
need to
and the other and the other thing with the environment too is, a lot of folks, and because one of the reasons why I do what I do now is because I had hired folks like that in the past, and what I think is different in terms of what I work on is that I do it from a owner operator mindset, not a BD mindset, right? And so I think that I think another piece of environment is it shows up as advisors that tell you what you want to hear instead of
Mhm.
actually challenging you, right? And you get reinforced with busy behavior instead of disciplined thinking, right? And then your internal teams are misaligned, and you're like, oh, this is what good really looks like. And it's like, it's not, right? You need to have that challenge. You need to have, um, you need to kind of have a group around you that's not going to always say yes, right? And I think that's very critical. I mean, once again, look at how multi-billion-dollar companies. Not saying everybody needs to go that way, right? Some folks just want to have a lifestyle business, but when you think about it, they have boards, right? They
Yep.
have senior executive leadership teams. Like these are the checks and balances to challenge the thinking to make sure that we are going down the right strategic path. If you just end up surrounding yourself by folks that always say yes, right? You're setting yourself up for failure, right? You need to have that challenge, but also, and this is a hard thing to say and a hard thing for a lot of folks to really grasp as you grow. The folks that are with you from startup to 5 million aren't the people that are necessarily the right people to get you to 10 million or to 20 million or so on, right? Some may be good to keep through that, but there's a lot that it's a different environment. There's different challenges. There's different things that need to take place in order to be successful at those certain sizes.
I mean, I think that's great. There's got to be an assessment and a reassessment. And it's important that you pay attention to, are your teammates the right teammates
Hmm.
as you're continuing to scale your companies? What you're describing reminds me of a recent Executive Gov piece on modernization. They pointed out that as agencies accelerate around cloud, cyber, AI, the contractors that don't elevate their internal environments are the ones that are falling behind. So it really reinforced your point. If the government sorry, if your environment doesn't evolve, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you just
Hmm.
won't be able to keep up.
Right. No, it's exactly right. And what's really important about modernization pressure is it isn't really a technology issue, it's a decision making issue, right? So if you think about, hey, as requirements move faster around cloud, cyber, AI, companies that fall behind aren't the ones without smart people. They're the ones whose environments don't force earlier decisions, clear standards, and those honest conversations about capability. If the rooms that you're in don't challenge you in terms of how you think, how you price, how you deliver, you're always going to be reacting to where the government already is instead of where they're going, right? And you've seen
Yeah,
that with the changes, like companies have been successful over the past 6 to 8 months versus those who are not, right? Those who are complaining versus those that are quiet, keeping their heads down and getting the job done and getting wins,
that's
right?
right. That's right. Like nose to the grindstone.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are some of the signs, though, that a company has outgrown its environment or its advisors that it has relied on that got them here? What are some of the signs that they might need to look for that times are changing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So there's a few signs that show up consistently. One is I call Groundhog Day, right? And that is hey, e- every year, like we're having the same strategic conversations, same pipeline issues, same pricing debates, same delivery problems. I like to say, hey, if you have a teaming partner, right, and you've been with them for multiple years, like, and you still haven't won anything with them, are they really still a good teaming partner? I mean, it may be nice that you get bids out, but I mean, look, I mean, cut it after 6 months. I mean, if you're bidding with somebody on a regular basis, hey, this is a strategic relate, and we preach that, right? Hey, if you move into a strategic relationship and you have a commitment to getting bids out the door, if you're 6, 8, 12 months in and you're not seeing anything productive out of it, it might be time to change your dance partner and kind of do a rotation, right? And kind of look outside of that, right? Another is when advisors and peers are validating your business rather than challenging your decisions, right? One of the things that like I don't one of the things that I do is we don't have comfortable decision or sorry, comfortable conversations with the clients that I work with because I challenge them, right? We have uncomfortable moments, right? But you need to have that because even if they have an idea or something they want to move forward that I agree with, I'm still going to pressure cook it with them to make sure, like, how did you think through this? Because a lot of like my interactions with them, and especially from how I learned, was like, what is the process that you're thinking this through? Like, is there a framework that you're applying this? Like, what was the original problem, right? How do we think we're going to solve it? What supporting data that we have? Like, there's a process to how you work through these things, like you're a McKinsey, like you're an Accenture, like you're a Bain, to be able to get to a successful outcome. And if you're just having a person, it's like, hey, yeah, that's great, let's just go. Like, no, like, let's really test it to make sure you are down the path. Because also my desire is that they learn to do the same thing with their staff, right?
Mm.
Because one of the things is you got to make sure that as you're setting up your team, that it's not overloading the work on you, right? So you need to be able to set up a team that's going to be able to run the structure, run the process as you manage them with their staff. Otherwise, you're as an owner, as a founder, as a senior executive, you're never going to be able to get out of the business.
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
I love that you say that. It makes me think a lot of like you have that friend you call when you just need the emotional echo chamber, and they're going to tell you you're doing a really great job at a thing. But then
yeah,
you have that friend that you call when you really want the hard truth because they're going to tell you what you're not seeing or what no one else was willing to tell you. And I
yes, I have
think,
a lot of therapy sessions. It feels like it's, but it's good, and the clients enjoy it. They love it. It's there's things that you certain as a founder, as an owner, as a senior executive, there's certain conversations, and I know this has been out there. You don't have it with lower level staff, right?
mm,
You need somebody to actually bounce it off of, trust in that relationship that you could have that type of conversation, and then expect that you can get that type of feedback.
yeah, because if they won't tell you the truth, it's probably not the relationship you need, at least not for growth.
Right, right.
Yeah. And so part of what I hear you saying is that having these types of systems creates some semblance of freedom. It gives you the opportunity for growth where you might have otherwise stagnated. And
Hmm.
so your philosophy is that systems create that freedom. So when a company actually makes the shift from chaos to discipline, what changes first and what do teaming partners or customers notice almost immediately?
So when they start to make the changes, one of the first thing is you start to see a de-stress, right?
Mm,
So when you start to replace chaos with discipline, right? You start to see that decisions will start to happen earlier in the chain, right? BD, pricing, delivery stop operating like a separate function. They start working together in a cohesive manner. I mean, it's surprising how many companies actually operate with these as separate functions and don't have that regular communication, right? Whereas like when I had run my staff meetings, like we have everybody involved with it, even with the subsidiary company that I had purchased. We would have the senior executives tied to that, but then each representative department too of accounting and sales, business development, right? Proposals, HR, all together in one in a weekly basis, right? Kind of moving the agenda forward so that we're all on the same page, right? So those decisions start happening earlier. Internal discipline kind of creates those external signals. Teaming partners, really experience fewer surprises with you. There's cleaner handoffs. There's more, say, confidence in what was proposed versus, the proposed versus like what was actually delivered, right? And then for acquisition professionals, right, kind of looking on the flip side of actually in the government with the acquisition folks, it shows up that hey, this company has pricing that makes sense. Their performance is predictable. This is a contractor that can communicate their value and benefit, and not just something that just throws something over the wall that was copied and pasted and from the RFP and from other places. And I mean, I saw something today on LinkedIn on that. That's I referenced first in mind. But it's I think for the government, for the acquisition professionals and those contracting officers and cores and whatnot that are out there that are reviewing this, I think that it puts together a better bid. It makes it a more of an enjoyable read, right, of what the solution is because it wasn't a last minute fire drill.
Yeah, I mean, customers want to know what they're going to get. Dependable, repeatable, predictable. It makes it easier for them when they know what they're getting from you.
Yes, and with that structure, right? You don't have to overload it with structure, but having that structure allows you to have freedom, right? And then you're not relying on those heroics, right? The same people to come in and save the day, right? And you're able to just be more successful with that. And and the thing too is like we mentioned earlier about turnover, right? The
Mhm.
burnout, right? The constant fire drill. And I said, hey, you could watch LinkedIn and see, and I mean, it's not a hidden fact. Like you could see like where folks are churning from, right? You're going to have a less of a churn. Folks are going to want to work there. They're going to see the longer opportunity, right? There's the right incentives in place. And it's not incentives that are just in one particular department. It's for the shared success.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, can you walk us through a moment where you saw that shift really click, like where results became obvious as soon as the team got on board with the concept?
Yeah, so there was a particular company, it was a multi-million-dollar GovCon that I mean, from the outside, successful, making money. They were doing both commercial and federal as well. They had great wins. It was, I'd say probably the contract mix was probably like 90% commercial, 10% GovCon. But the GovCon was kind of by accident. You know, They got lucky. They 5 for 5 on their first 5 bids, right? The problem was is that they didn't know how they were pricing it, right? And so the reason why they went 5 for 5 is their pricing was so ridiculously low, right? And they didn't know what they were doing. But the problem was is then by year 2, they're losing money on all 5 prime contracts. And now they're in a situation where that financial impact. So now you go back to the financial scorecard, right? So that now highlights these issues. They hadn't won another contract in the past 2 years, right? They weren't even getting bids out the door. The owner's like, hey, this is now starting to hurt the ability for me to run my commercial
Oof.
group. And yeah, I mean, it was just
Oof.
painful, right? And so, basically with that, the shift there wasn't, and you'll hear folks say, oh, well, you need automation, you need AI. It's like we need to get to the root of what's actually wrong,
Yeah.
right? And it actually got to the point of like there was no process. And what was interesting was is they were actually able to scale their commercial. That commercial wild west is kind of what went into the federal side, and they thought that was okay to operate like that because the commercial side was successful,
Oh,
right?
no.
And how they were able to do that, that's another interesting case. But what we had to do within the federal side of the house was it was a full reset, right? And it was with kind of each of the markets, right? Working with the CFO, working with the head of growth, and basically resetting them in terms of how they were doing pricing, how they were doing their bids, and almost like a triage process, right? So you're a doctor, you have a patient come in, like, where's the bleed, right?
Mm.
And so what it was is we didn't even have feedback because they hadn't even submitted a bid in 8 months. And so the first thing it was triaging through that is like, start submitting bids so I can see where you're having issues. And then from there, like, the one great thing about federal government work is you can request a debrief to understand where you screwed up. So you really have, I mean, you don't have that in commercial. I can't go and say to a commercial client, say, well, hey, could you let me know where I screwed up? Right? It's like they don't do that. They go, no, right? So the government, you can request a debrief, have them line it out for you, and you can then work a continuous improvement process from there, right? So the process we worked with them through that was to understand where they were having issues on technical, fix that in the next go round, right? Then we started to see this repeating pricing issues, and it was like significantly overpriced. And it's like, what are we like? Guys, like, you're seeing the debriefs. Like, why are we continuing to do this?
Yeah.
And it was a disconnect with accounting because, hey, there was losses and they're trying to make up for losses. And I'm like, when you continue to
Yeah.
try to do that, you're just gonna you're always overpricing. Like, you're never gonna bring in a win now, right?
That's right.
So you went so low. Now you're trying to correct that. I mean, you need to cut. Hey, last year was last year. You're at zero right now, right?
That's
Like,
right.
it's like,
That's right.
you can't.
Ooh.
Otherwise, you're just always going to be chasing. So once we fix that, by month 5 of working with them, first contract win. Month 7 was second, and then month 8 was a major recompete win. And then it was, okay, hey, now that we've made these changes, kind of locking that all in, and we had the defined path going forward. So it wasn't, adding tools, it wasn't adding people, it wasn't a subscription to GovWin, right? As some folks were like, as soon as they get, hey, I need you to spend 12,000.
Yeah.
Not the
It wasn't
GovWin
that, right?
subscription.
It
Come
was
on,
just
man.
having how do we get from A to B? How do we get from B to C? How do we get from C to D, and then submit the bid? Right?
How do we strengthen
And-
our processes?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
And doing and the thing was is like, they were submitting these bids for 2 years in between, and it's like they had all this awesome past performance, but they just didn't know how to communicate their value or benefit. And when you pull all those things together, you start having successful bids. Each one was improving, and you just continue to build upon that.
Yeah, I love it. So we're running short on time, but before we wrap up, for those companies maybe who are listening and they know they're operating in chaos, but they're nervous about what discipline might actually cost them, what's your unsolicited advice?
All right. So my unsolicited advice is this: stop trying to fix chaos by working harder, right? Discipline doesn't take opportunity away. It takes uncertainty away, right?
Huh?
And uncertainty is what's exhausting your team, right? It's straining your partnerships and it's putting your reputation at risk. When companies make that shift, the biggest surprise is how much calmer everything becomes and how much better they perform because of it, right? So chaos feels fast, but discipline is what actually lets you move forward.
Yeah, I love it. We say boring is best.
Yes.
That's how we get that message across, and I love it. So, Tom, this was brilliant. We invite you back whenever you want to come back. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You can find Tom on LinkedIn, and you can learn more about Kraken at www.krakenfederal.com. Be sure to subscribe for more unsolicited conversations about GovCon growth, partnering, and operational excellence. And we'll see you next time here on Unsolicited.